we're going to look at the whole area dealing with shape. And what's interesting is that a lot of the arts that we look at deal with shape. Here, the definition: shape is an area that stands out from its surroundings because of its defined or implied boundaries, or because of its differences of value or color or texture. So here, Henri Matisse, who's a superb artist who uses shape, and you can see with the horse-driven carriage here, see the horse here, the shape of the horse, almost childlike. The movement of the carriage is slanted backwards. The leaf form motifs moving around, these cutouts, and also here you can see these little forms here moving around. We're going to do some art where we use stencils, so give you a pretty good idea of just looking at the work of Matisse and some of the things that are done here with his work. Again here, look at the preface. Look at the forms here, the shapes. And you know, it's like the artists, they use similar shapes here. Circular shapes repeated again, circular shapes again, repeated. Here he picks it up again, and here. So one of the things that artists do is to pull things together, to make them appear together as a whole, is they'll use repetition. Let me just go back a little. Here we have the rectangular verticals, and over here he uses rectangular verticals. He repeats it again, here, 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 and he starts to use it in, you know, a little bit in here too. So he repeats those motifs. Here, it's interesting. You can see the shapes here, like this box form. This probably looks like it's almost like a box that's covered with fabric, and it's in perspective. You can see it's going back to 1-point perspective. Here's another box here. I noticed it was like a box or box-like form. A lot of what we call like curvilinear forms, like very organic curvilinear forms. And those same curvilinear forms are picked up here in these forms, these angelic forms. Here, very abstract, but you can see the movement. You can see a lot of the movement going on in here. Here, Ponyo, or Ponyo, you can see here they use repetitive forms or repetitive shapes. So here in the water, repetitive shapes that are used in here. In the boats, 1, 2, 3 boats. One, this boat here that's large, but the one in the background, what makes it set to the background is the fact that it's overlapping. The big boat's overlapping, and then the smaller boat is overlapping the front boat. Then you have this form, this nice, again, curvilinear type form here. It picks up the curves, even here in this dome and in this face. Notice the perspective in these shadows that are coming out, kind of lead you right into the form here. So there's a lot of thought that goes into making this image. Joan Miro, you can see like these like nice shapes and forms that are used in her work. And if you looked at the complete body of her work, you'll see that she uses a lot of these type of forms. So you may look at this painting it by itself and may not get it, but when you start to see the whole body of paintings, a lot of artists, you have to look at the complete body of paintings. Interesting thing that all of this is kind of like what we call like grayed out colors, except for one, and that's right in here, where it's like a nice strong cadmium red that really pops out. Here we see shapes, but now here, this is what we call implied shapes. So here to show a square. You can see all they needed was 4 dots that draw your eye from one dot to the other. This brings your eye around through those dots. Here, we're looking at these implied lines. Didn't have to make lines around the triangular form, but just use lines going across and stop, 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 and that creates this triangular form. Here the circle is made with curved or radiused dash marks to create the implied shapes. Again, even something as simple, this might have been taken from a photograph, but if you can see that this pastel monotype was, they used these dots. So these dots have nice repetitive shapes here. And then in the foreground, the landscape, the skyline shapes, the strong skyline shapes that bring the forms forward. Here, you can see the artist Utley. If you go through the internet and look at some of his work, you'll see that he uses a lot of this childlike, which seems childlike imagery, but when you start to look at it, his placement, like with this bright yellow in the foreground, right? We call it asymmetrical shape, and then he has like this blue cools in the background here, and then he has this shape going forward. It looks almost childlike, but a child probably wouldn't do this perspective shape going in the background and think of using a bright red in the foreground. Here again, spatial relationships can create with shapes, similar shapes. So here, overlapping shapes, spaced out shapes, planes, moving like ellipses, they move back. Placement, you can make something look like it's floating just by placing it high in the box. Here, the square, overlapping squares, moving around with the shapes. Here we have perspective type shapes. You can see the shapes, they move back and around with these planes. And these like amoeba or organic forms here. These we call like biographic or biomorphic planes. And you can see here, it's similar to what we did with the ellipses. You can make something look like it's moving around in space just by moving the forms around. Here again, 3D planes broken out. So we call it the exploded view, where you can take something and open it up so you can see inside, outside, and how things move around, how things would be made, and then showing how it would be constructed. Again, an exploded view. The top view, fully contained, full view. Same thing here. Circle, flat top circle. Here, dissected. Here, the full shape. Here, we see again the shape, an exploded view of the form. So it gives us an idea. If I were trying to build this, this is what I would need to do. Again here. And same thing here with this ellipse. So here we have almost like a graphic form. It's like something that might have been done in Photoshop, but by breaking out the shapes, you can see this figure is made up of many facets of shapes. These shapes make up the body. Here, all around here, the shapes. Shapes, that's all shapes. Contours, contour with the body, contour with the side of the face. Clicked out of it by mistake. And so you can see that even the hair itself is like one like huge graphic shape. Here's something that should be pretty familiar to you, but here we can see like perspective types, forms and shapes the box. This is a clear 2-point perspective. So one here is showing it going inward. Texture. We see a lot of shapes together like this. When you put a multitude of shapes, you create what we call texture. And here, with the small texture, it almost gives you goosebumps because you can feel it when you see a texture like this. Now here, like this dimpling here of the shapes here, and this shape, this shape. Sometimes you can just go out and look for stuff, and photograph it, and find things that have those shapes, or you can go out like this artist here and literally make it. Again, strong graphic shape, the circle and the figure in here, and with this spiraling here, which looks like it's moving in a different direction. Sometimes just by moving the lines like that, and create this moire. We call it a moire effect. So here's Picasso's Guernica, and this is made up of many shapes. You know, you could spend hours just looking at this painting, looking at all of the different shapes that have been used, and how he repeats shapes to create the movement around, like this form here, with screaming. Here again, it's screaming and yelling out, and the horse yelling out. Here again, you can see these shapes yelling out. The bull is something that he uses quite a bit in other images. I'll show you a diagram. So here's a diagram that kind of like shows you how that form, how the movement, how it moves around in the shape. So let's go back. You can see it moving around. It brings your eye around the shape. Full of shapes. George Braque. This is good. Like, he and Picasso, they did a lot of work, almost kind of similar in a way. But here you can see a lot of shapes, a lot of repetitive shapes. Here, these motifs in here, creating interesting shapes. Let's look at this image. It's Tempura. When you see on panel, that means it's painted on wood. But you can see like this, it's made up of big shapes, these curved shapes, this background, here, there's shapes in here, this big one, large shape, this archway here, which again, you see it's picked up again here with an archway. Again, here, almost like with an arch type shape. And again, here, he picks it up again with an arch type shape. So, the artists they usually plan out things to incorporate repetitive shapes. A lot of that kind of stuff going on here. A lot of the arched type shapes here in the tree forms. No tree really looks like that, but the artist, using the artist license, creates marks that kind of give you a feeling of the leaves. Here, you can see the forms here. It looks like these figures going across the top where Christ is. The figures here, figures in the background. A lot of circular forms, a lot of circular shapes. A lot of circular shapes in this image. It's kind of like what kind of helps tie it together. Paul Cezanne, his Bathers. So when we look at it, look at the big shape, the shapes that the clouds make in the background, these nice shapes that are being made by the trees, foreground. Here's some of these drawings, early sketches. Here's again like a watercolor sketch. So before even getting involved with the major work, he may start off with a drawing and then move to a watercolor sketch. Some more sketches. So he works his ideas. He doesn't just start out, he may make several smaller works and then finally deciding on the major piece that he wants to work on. Charles Burchfield, watercolor. Often I look at a lot of watercolors today, and Charles Burchfield would not make it into some of these what we call watercolor societies, but his work, it really stands out. It has a nice, strong, abstract feel to it, and you can see these nice shapes that he's made. These very nice organic shapes that he uses in his work. Charles Sheeler. It's probably almost, you can see the large shapes here. With these shapes, it brings about unity and harmony. The circles, see a lot of the circular forms, even here. So at first glance, you just say, oh, wow, it's a nice picture of a train with wheels. But when you begin to look at it, what really struck him in his heart was probably looking at these shapes that were being made here. This one's almost self-explanatory, but the main thing is like these shapes, the squares. Here on this side, we got a triangular form, squares. I'm glad I'm able to show you this in this format, because on the screen in the classroom, it doesn't really show the brightness and intensity of the colors. But the overlapping of the color, the artist plays the purple, which is close in value to this background color, is blue. But it's overlapping this bright greenish, light green and yellow. This yellow wants to pull forward, but this color right here is pushing it back. It's overlapping it, so it's kind of like pushing it back. Same here, the intensity of this yellow wants to pull forward further than this, but it's so overlapped just by a little edge here to push it back. And same here, and then you can see the translucency of the colors, and how they move through. Here you can see like this is moving through in that shape. Here, similar, red is so intense. It's like a play of a war going on here between the red and yellow. Like the yellow wants to move forward, but the red is very strong and it maintains itself. Also, the shape of that color maintains itself, it brings it forward. So these are different. This side is different from this side. Like this color right here is in the background and it stays in the background. Here we have Josef Albers, who's like, his main thing was like with the shape. He used the same shape motif for a series of paintings, probably hundreds of paintings, just dealing with the square. He's the father of color theory. So he did many color combinations to show how colors work with one another. So here, these two colors are like analogous to one another. They're close to one another. It's just like one value step, a purple and then a lighter purple. Here, abstract painting, they break it up into what we call a triptych. And the triptych is like 3 panels. And then you can see like these loose, really loose, abstract, splashy shapes. Yeah, they're defined. When I say shapes, you can see them. You can see the defined shapes in the work. Ledger's work, his figures, they've always been like this type of shapes, these geometric shapes. These figures, they're very geometrically strong. The table here, and if you probably notice, it is isometric. We talked about it, but you can see the isometric shape, parallel, parallel, This one lines parallel. This is equal. This is parallel. This is parallel to this one, and this is parallel to that. And again, here's Goya, and the big shape right here. Look at that. Let's go back. Large shape here. It's a huge shape in the background. It brings you back, and then this layering of shapes here. The way it works at. And sculpture. So we're gonna end here with this one. You can see like this sculptural shapes and these layering of shapes, and even in sculpture, although you may say, well, it's going to be made up of a lot of shapes of sculpture, but you can see how these shapes and lines and how it's been used to bring out these shapes in the radius forms. See, like this forms here like this, bang, 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 bang. Radius, it's all radius. It's what gives it that energy. Kind of like brings it, like say from here, and just brings it out. Bang, 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 bang. Really gives you that energy. It's really interesting. It makes it really interesting to look at. A lot of stuff in here. Just like you can spend time here. You could pause on this and just really look at this image and the things that are going on in here. Look at this curvilinear form here. Really interesting. This shelf shape here. A lot of nice things here. So we're going to end here with this image, and then I'm going to go to another video where I'm going to show you the assignment that we'll have.